I'd like some help with overcoming my phobia of birds, please.
Oh, no, yeah.
How does that affect you, Claire?
Basically, I just can't sit down outside, just keep getting up and down out of my seat, can't relax outdoors.
And have you any idea when this may have started?
Well, the earliest memory I had of it was when I was about 7 and I was eating my breakfast in the kitchen and I looked down and my cat had a bird in its mouth.
OK, that will probably do it. So let me ask you, how old do you think you were then?
About 7, I think.
And can I ask you, have you got any memories of being around birds before that?
Yeah, so when I was very young, I think I must have been a toddler, I remember going missing from the back garden and my mum and dad found me and I was actually feeding the neighbour's chickens.
OK, right. So just going back to when the cat came in and had a bird in its mouth, if you think about that memory now and score that out of 10, 10 being the worst, how does that make you feel? Could you give me a score?
A 9 or a 10.
OK, right. So let me tell you what's happened here, because no one's born with a phobia. You've heard us say that. So you've learned to be frightened of birds because of a traumatic incident. And obviously, the cat bringing this bird in, having it in its mouth, the bird being dead, is that trauma. And what I do know from what I've just asked you is that prior to that, you were OK with birds. In fact, not only were you OK with them, you're actually willing to feed them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I want you to understand is that the trauma was actually you seeing the dead bird, right? The bird didn't do anything. I want you just to consider this in a different way, in the fact that you saw this bird dead and that actually frightened you. And then in that moment of fear, and your brain then wants to protect you, and your brain would basically say, I don't want to feel like this. It's got to make a decision on what caused it. And instead of blaming the cat for killing the bird, you blame the bird for being dead because that's the traumatic situation. So now you're being protected. Your fight or flight mechanism is protecting you from birds. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
But actually, birds never did anything. In fact, the bird in this case was the victim because it died.
That's so true.
Is that fair to say, Claire?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And your phobia relates to birds when, if we were being really accurate, it was a dead bird, so one that doesn't move.
Yeah, and if you're accurate, really, if you had a phobia, you should have a phobia of cats because the cat caused the problem. I mean, I'm glad you haven't, but that caused the problem. So when you look at it as an adult now, because obviously you created this as a child, but when you look at it as an adult, what has a bird ever done?
Nothing.
OK. So now, does that feel different?
It does, actually, yeah.
So if I ask you now to look back at that memory, you said that was a 9 out of 10. If you look back at the memory now, you'll notice that that doesn't feel as bad. And give me a score on it now.
About 6.
OK. So what's happening now is your brain's processing that. And if I asked you again in maybe half an hour, it will go down to 0 and you would feel fine.
Oh, OK. Oh, wow.
They're good, aren't they, Claire?
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, literally, our thoughts create our feelings and our feelings create our behaviours. The minute you have better thoughts, you have better feelings. And what we've done there is change your emotion to birds, because whereas it's been fear and you've kind of now seen it with pity, that really does it gives you just a completely different perspective. So keep with it and you will notice it will lessen. But
it has switched off your fight or flight mechanism, so now you don't need to protect yourself from birds and therefore you won't feel anxious.
Well
You'll be fine with them.
Well
also,
done,
Claire, like now's such a lovely time of year to be out listening to them, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And, you don't want to rob yourself of that, so best of luck.
No.
Good luck,
Thank
darling.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for your call.
This is interesting. We're going to speak to Deborah in Norfolk, who's not only worried about her phobia, that she'll explain in a minute, but also she's passed it on to her daughter. Deborah, thanks for joining us. Cheers for calling.
Morning.
Tell us about your phobia and how you passed it on to your child.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, well, my mum has a phobia of it, my sister has, I have, and I've passed it on to my daughter, which I feel guilty about because she's worse than what I am, actually.
Would I be right in... So it's all of you've got a phobia of frogs and toads, is that right? And would I be right in saying that... So if your mum had it, would I be right in saying that yours is worse than your mum's and that your daughter's is worse than yours?
Yes.
that is usually the way that it works. So there's 4 ways of getting a phobia, and one of those does happen to be copied behaviour. So this is like kind of conditioned behaviour. It's a conditioned fear. You've got to ask yourself the question, why do you have the accent that you do? Because you copy your environment. And that is literally what has gone on here. And that's really exciting because you could be the one that changes it. And incidentally, the reason when a child copies their parent it's worse is because ultimately, your mum may have had an experience, and therefore it's her thing, and whatever happened to her. So it might be in certain environments or in certain contexts. Whereas when the child copies, well, we don't know what we should fear, so we'll just fear anything to do with frogs and toads, and then it kind of carries on, so each generation gets worse and worse and worse. But like I said, the exciting thing is that you can actually change this. So you can be the one that changes everybody's thought processes. And the first thing to consider realistically in that change of perspective is, when has a frog or toad ever harmed you or any of your family?
No, never really.
Absolutely.
OK, and then the second thing to consider is, do you like animals? Have you got any pets?
Yes, but yeah, I've got a dog, yeah.
OK, so if you've got a dog, you know that animals are fine. Animals really want to do their own stuff. And frogs and toads are frightened of humans, and they'll always try and escape. So they're not going to do anything to you.
Right. I think it's the look of them.
Yep.
I know that they're not going to do anything, but it's just that look.
And it's interesting. It's interesting that you say the look, because you've just been taught to fear them, and because you've copied your mum and your sister, and you've been taught to fear them. You don't actually figure out why. It's just that this is the fear. That's what it looks like. But ultimately, if you look at the animal kingdom, animals come in all different shapes and sizes, don't they?
Yeah.
And then you've got to ask yourself the question, and again, this is just about changing your perspective, because when we can see it for what it is and not how it felt to us as a child, then everything changes. So putting it into perspective and seeing it for what it is and not how it felt, what or who actually created this fear in you?
Well, I suppose my mum.
Absolutely. Exactly that. It was your mum. And when you can start to think, actually, maybe we have got it wrong here, because a frog or a toad actually never did anything to me, and it's unfair to blame something that hasn't ever harmed me and has got no intention of harming me, then you can start to see it in a different way. Now, I do accept this is conditioned behaviour. You have never known any different. For a lot of people, if we have a phobia that starts when we're 6, 7, 8 years of age, we've got something to go back to. We've got some thought processes to go back to before the phobia was installed.
Like Claire did earlier.
Like Claire, because she already was OK with birds. But you have no norm. You have nothing to go back to. So this is a brand new relearning, and it's literally just reminding yourself and seeing it and saying, actually, OK, I've been a bit out of order. It wasn't really you. You've never done anything to me.
Unjustified.
And it wasn't justified. And then by doing that, what you're actually doing is you're starting to dilute that thought process. Anything that interrupts a thought that's more positive, we have neural pathways in the brain that we create. The more you travel down it, the quicker you can access it. As with yourself, you've travelled down that frog and toad fear neural pathway lots of times, and it's well trodden. Now we've got to create a better one, and that better one will be things such as, hang on a second, you've never done anything to me. And by doing that and repeating it, that will gain momentum, and it will start to change.
Deborah, we want to get through 1 or 2 more calls, so we have to stop them. Thank you so much, and good luck with it.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks.
Good luck, darling.
It's so interesting how, phobias are either, from year dot, or
it's learnt behaviour.
It is.
Because we don't challenge things that our parents tell us.
Yeah.
We're brought up to respect our parents and our elders. So,
yeah. Let's go to Glasgow now. Rachel, morning to you, Rachel.
Hi.
Hey, Rachel.
Hello, darling. You're going on holiday in July, but there's a big problem, isn't there? Tell the Speakmans what it is.
Yeah, so I'm going on holiday in July with my kids, and I have an extreme phobia on crabs, which means that the thought of going to the beach with my kids is absolutely petrifying to me. And I just want some help, if possible.
OK. Do you have any memory whatsoever And the reason that we always ask this question is because there's two ways to approach a phobia. One way is to do, as we just with the conditioned behaviour, such as we saw there with Deborah, is creating new practices to weaken it. But if we know how it started, we can actually take away the foundation and the structure starts to fall apart. So do you have any knowledge on how this may have started?
Well, the only memory that I have is when I was about 6 or 7, we'd went to a beach and my parents had a disagreement about stopping for me to use the bathroom, and I think it turned into a bit of a miserable ending to the day.
Yeah.
And it was on the beach, so I don't know if it's connected or anything like that, but the crabs weren't actually there. I didn't see the crabs, so it could just be connected to the beach.
Could I ask you a question? Do you know whether you've ever had any positive interaction with crabs?
No.
So you've never played with them, you've never touched them when you were a kid, your parents, your mum, dad have never told you that you've messed with them when you were a kid?
Sorry, that's my mistake. Yes, there was. My mum said that when I was younger than that age, that apparently I had been playing with them on a beach, touching crabs, was very comfortable with them. That was before the time at the beach when they'd had the disagreement. So I think I was originally okay with them and the beach, and it's kind of stemmed to a young age.
Rachel, that is a fabulous place to start, because if you played with them on the beach when you were younger, what would that realistically suggest?
That I was originally okay with them.
Correct. And what does that mean in regards to crabs?
So they weren't harmful.
They were, sorry?
They weren't harmful. They didn't scare me.
That's right. And it sounds like your mum and dad were arguing on the beach. And it was the argument that's caused this issue. And because you're on the beach, potentially you blame the crabs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, because the fear kind of goes further than that now, and it's the actual beach and the sea and kind of all sea life kind of things that now I'm scared of, so it's just get bigger and bigger. It's just the beach is terrifying.
Rachel, can I just suggest something, because we're running out of time? Are you guys all right to hang around?
100%.
Of course.
Let's get this crab thing nailed.
Yes.
Yes.
Rachel, we don't want you to ruin your holiday.
Crabs sorted.
Exactly. Let's
Thank
embrace
you,
the crabs,
Rachel.
Rach. So stay on the line, the
Give you a
Speakmans will come
call.
to you, all right?
We'll give you a call back.
Thank you, and thank you, Nik and Eva.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
So wonderful to watch
Absolutely
you.
wonderful.